Okay. So, we have a 12 o'clock meeting? Great. Should we call that to order? Okay, let's call the roll call. Lisa, would you take that for us?
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Adam Dance,
Present.
Mr. Walker,
Here.
Mr. Jeff Dance,
Here.
Mr. Picardi,
Here.
George,
Here.
and Ms. Kaminsky.
Here.
Okay, roll call's taken. Approval of the agenda. I would be seeking a motion to amend the agenda, to add, 3A to the airport planning, discussion.
The agenda we're looking at right now in this big packet, or is it a separate packet?
What Lindsay emailed out, regular 12 o'clock meeting. Preston, since you have that, would you like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda.
Okay, to 3A for airport planning?
Yes.
Second. Thank you, George. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Biz, I think we can go back to you.
So most of these airports are heavily subsidized. And most of them don't have opportunities for growth, by the way. So I think that it's in your interest, because you have opportunities for growth and sustainability of the airport, and which would get you to ultimate sustainability. You ought to be focused on actually subsidizing the airport in a lot of ways. Because because you have opportunities for growth, that means you have opportunities to get federal funding to finance that growth, and it all snowballs. It's great to be sustainable, self-sustainable financially at some point. I don't think you're there yet. You need to be probably 40,000 ops a year. You need to be at least 250,000 gallons of Jet A to make your business, as small as it is, work, and make a profit. So and you can get there. If you get these guys to just tanker their flights here, that gets you a baseline, to cover your payroll. Get that fixed cost. That's 250,000 gallons right there on the ramp with contour. But now that's something to grow off of and make it a bigger economic driver for the town. I'm pretty long-winded too, Barry.
So, Vince, you mentioned heavily subsidized. Define heavily subsidized, and I'm sure the answer is soup to nuts.
I think that, I was not shocked to find out that you guys spend $400,000 a year sustaining this airport. I wouldn't be shocked if you were spending that kind of money. I would be if you didn't have Contour here. If it was just, 8-based aircraft and the occasional guy stopping in, I would be shocked if it was that much money. But that airport that has 8-based aircraft and few arrivals a day from tourists who are going for a $100 hamburger or whatever, they don't justify $500,000 a year. You've got, again, it's really unusual, and you guys think it's just normal, but to have 30 seats coming in twice a day is a big deal. You can build off of that. You can really build off of that.
What I would add is, of the airports in our region, think about sustainability. Traverse City is sustainable. Grand Rapids is sustainable. Nothing else is. Everything else requires some sort of local government subsidy. The difference being the scale of what they offer, but also the fact that number one revenue source for airports of that size is parking. And that's just driven then by the number of passengers and the number of cars that you're sequestering in those parking lots and garages. We don't have numbers to generate that yet.
To generate, warrant additional parking?
To generate the revenue from the parking. If infrastructure is needed, and again, it's all of those kind of chicken and egg issues.
And did you say, that based on federal regulation, at least for a period of time, we can't charge for parking?
I was gonna bring that up, yeah.
Currently, the way it is interpreted and understood, if you've used federal dollars to pave an area, you can't turn that into a revenue-generating asset.
And have we used federal dollars out on that lot? Okay.
But we
But-
still have space.
Yes, we could have a new lot, not use federal dollars and charge for parking. Okay, we can come back to that. On the agenda, point number 5, public-private partnerships. Later this afternoon, we'll continue discussing those. Are there great model public-private partnerships that you've seen? Frankly, the FBO operator probably is a good example of a public-private partnership, right? The public is
So you've got one right
supporting-
now.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't feel that way to the county because they're writing the check, or writing a big check every year, but, you know, you've got it now, but that's only if the county doesn't recognize that, you know, there's a plane stopping here twice a day that's got 30 seats on it.
Yeah. No,
And the other
right.
economic value, you know, the rule of thumb for airports in communities like this is for every sustainable airport, every dollar you invest is worth 3 of the local economy. It's the biggest multiplier that any community can have in terms of investment, in terms of return on investment to the community. So, if you're getting value out of that partnership, you just don't see it. Or maybe it's the casino that's getting that value, or the golf course, or maybe some other community that's getting it because they're flying here, then driving out of town.
And sometimes you don't see it until it's not there,
Right.
and then you realize what you have.
But I mean, there's a benefit, and the local businesses need to be your partners, right? So I mean, at the casino, everybody that goes in there gets a player's card. They should be emailing every person with a Chicagoland address saying, did you know we have daily service from O'Hare to here? Oh, you know, you're a $50 hand gambler? We'd love to give you a $100 voucher to come up here. Arcadia Bluff should be telling people, you know, we have daily service from time to time. Do you know, and then, you know, for the high-end clientele, because they do get high-end clientele, you know, do you know about our local airport? You know, they might be building a hangar, you know, the services. I mean, and to go back to, the runway, lengthening, it's not that our gut says that's a bad idea. It's just that that's so big picture and so expensive that there are things that you could do in the short term, which are a fraction of the cost, which could have immediate impact. Whether that be and we know that the fuel truck has issues, but whether it's a hangar or more courtesy cars or a rental car service or whatever the services are, because the infrastructure you really have, it's just improving the experience, for the people that come in on Contour Air and the people that come in on the general aviation side that can have a more immediate impact. It's not that the runway thing isn't but it's so expensive. I mean, you could do all those other things I named, and that would build you about this much runway. So it's, you know, there's sort of short-term goals and long-term goals, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't be putting away money every year to lengthen the runway or to replace the fuel tanks. I mean, you know,
What's the deferred maintenance on the airport, by the way? How old are your tanks, and how's the runway? I saw it in the wintertime, so I didn't get a sense of how many cracks there are in the asphalt and that kind of thing.
From a pavement perspective, our main taxiway Alpha is in dire need. It's on our schedule right now, out 2 years. Everything's funding dependent. Our north-south crosswind runway will be not far behind. This year, we're upgrading lighting on our main runway, doing a safety upgrade with grading. So the main runway, that pavement is 3 years old,
Oh, great.
so, well, at least the top
Yep, right.
part of it. So that's in great shape.
How often do you get a crosswind landing?
In the summer, I mean, it's ideal for CA, single engine stuff, depending on wind direction. Other than that, it's not used much. So, you know.
I imagine a lot of guys are training, doing touch and goes on your north-south runway.
No, they're actually using our main runway
Okay,
because,
even better, right?
because they've got,
You got the width and the length of the camera.
and it's got all of the, navigation
Stuff, right,
accessories,
the
so they
RNAV
can
and ILS
do
and-
ILS practice and not have anybody else around to interfere and.
So you're getting used by other airports that are doing flight training.
Correct.
Well, that's okay, count their ops.
So, somebody somewhere told me something in regard to that, for flight training, that they don't land here because there's a cost to that, as opposed to using it, but not actually landing. Is that accurate, inaccurate?
Is there a landing fee?
There is a landing fee. One time, one of my ops guys improperly, forced someone to pay it, and they shouldn't have. And then that is where that all came from. I've corrected that since, but.
So, to bullet point 6, and Tony, I think you had a great lead in. In summary, in the interest of the time, what I'm hearing is really make sure you're getting maximum utilization out of the existing assets. Work with community stakeholders to get the occupancy as high as possible.
Before you worry about 70 seats, make sure those 30 seats are full.
Exactly. Look at, seriously, an investment in a hangar, to bolster GA business and fuel sales. You know, really make sure there's, good service, with respect to rental cars and supporting the infrastructure that exists.
Something I'll add, because since we're under this topic of public-private partnerships, is in some of the bigger conversations that have been going on about directions going forward, this is something I've stated before in some of those conversations, is I believe there needs to be private enterprise involved, because it's private enterprise that is driven by a profit motive, customer service motive, and that if you don't have those aspects driving things, and it's just government owned and run, you're not going to get focused on these other issues, because that's not the way governments tend to work.
You know, why don't we take the last little bit here and maybe go around the table, starting with Karen, and just, if there's any questions of Albert or Biz or Tony, before they depart, give each member a moment or two for a little lightning round here of Q&A.
Personally, I think you offered a lot of more information that gets me thinking about the different opportunities we do have and utilizing what we have as our assets to their full capability. So I appreciate all the information you guys brought, but I don't have any further questions. I just have to digest what I heard.
And Barry, would the construction of a hangar be an eligible expense for our funds from the federal government that we'd be getting?
Yes and no.
That's a tough one.
Theoretically, yes, but the priority would be so low that ever achieving it would be difficult. Because everything is ranked in a priority standpoint, and you have to spend dollars on the more important things first. Pavements always come at the forefront, and other infrastructure.
So, for the funding coming from our employment numbers, government is going to tell us how we have to spend it. We don't have local discretion.
Some discretion within the confines of what we're allowed to. So it's not like we got these dollars, we can spend however we want. But it's not like they dictate either. We're the ones that are saying, here are the things we need. But based on what we say we need, they have a process of ranking those based on priority. Want dollars going first to the most high priority items.
So really,
And anything that's revenue generating immediately goes to the bottom of that list. Everything else theoretically is not revenue generating.
Well, one of the things we'll do when we go back to our regularly scheduled program is, set fixed times for our committees to meet. That would be a great discussion for our budget committee. Cindy?
Yeah.
Any questions?
I don't think so. I mean, Karen pretty much summed it up. I mean, it was a lot to take in. It was good information. And I really can't think of any other questions right now off the top of my head to ask.
Okay, thank you. Preston?
Back to partnering with local businesses like the casino in Arcadia. I know we spoke about this. What were those few conferences that we should be attending each year?
Well, it'd just be interesting for, like, well, if you can attract, if there's not something that's intrinsically wrong with the airport that otherwise doesn't allow you to attract business, general aviation business, it seems to me you ought to be attending NBAA schedulers and dispatchers conferences, or the annual NBAA show. Typically that's done, you get this really strange dichotomy here. You're not selling a lot of fuel, but yet you've got commercial service, and so it's, that, a lot of times your fuel supplier will take you to those events and pay for your booth at that event.
Okay.
I doubt your fuel supplier is gonna subsidize you in that way here, because you're just not pumping any gas.
Have we ever been at the airport, for you or Bill or anybody? Anything else, Preston?
That was awesome. I guess I was just wondering whose responsibility that generally falls under, the partnering. Is it the directors?
It's both,
Is it the
both.
board? Should,
The FBOs and the airport authorities typically both go.
okay.
The airport authority director will go, and they may have a booth. They're trying to promote economic development around the airport as well. The FBO operative may be there trying to, that's when you're in a competitive environment. Like, quarter share isn't on your ramp every week. That just doesn't show up here. And they're so infrequent, they wouldn't bother to negotiate a rate,
Right.
or fees ahead of time, because they're gonna be here once a year or twice a year. So you're in a difficult spot. You really gotta get out of this spiral. You've gotta find a way to sell fuel.
But letting people know you're here
Yeah, that's important.
is important.
That's the purpose of the conference.
Yeah, because of the people that are chartering jets and planning where these things get sent and everything else are at those conferences. And if you can say, we're the alternative and we sell gas cheaper, we have a hangar available, we're not as crowded as Traverse, or this, we're 20 minutes from the golf course, we're next to,
Well, and we even have a marketing budget, which I'm not too familiar with at the moment, but I think maybe spending some of those dollars on getting in front of people that actually charter jets and have their own planes and letting them know we're here.
and even seeing what the other airports that look like yours, what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to have all the amenities to do that.
You need to have a rental car service, otherwise there's not much point, right? You need to have,
I think we'll have that in short order, Bill.
Right.
Yeah.
but those low-hanging fruit that you're missing, is.
On the surface it is, but it's not, it's not always that easy, yeah.
But it's a problem. By the way, I wanted to ask about this federal dollars, appreciate you're about to have a whole lot more employment revenue than you used to have, which theoretically means that money is now available to resurface taxiway A, but the dollars are fungible, right? So you may find that you've got $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year that otherwise you were spending on something else, that you now have available to finance a hangar.
I agree. Dylan?
So, we're spinning our wheels on the fuel conversation. Would it be beneficial to buy a fuel truck as an airport that we then allow the fixed base operator to use to make it, because I feel like we're inconvenient on the fuel and it's too much we can't compete with cost, with O'Hare on our commercial service, but would starting with making it more convenient, would we be able to sell more jet fuel?
You just gotta get value. And then, because you don't wanna buy a tanker truck because it's expensive as hell. It's $250,000 for one of those or whatever in new. And the fuel supplier will subsidize your rental of it if you buy enough fuel. you've gotta, it seems like you're
So the
stuck.
question is,
But
how do
nobody
we
wants
sell
to
them
buy it
fuel?
here because they gotta pull up to the pump.
For the Jet A customer, which is your biggest margin typically and your highest volume, some airports make money off of low lead. You were making money off of low lead, kind of, because you weren't selling anything else.
Is that what Cape Air used?
They use low lead, yeah.
Okay.
But you've gotta find a way to, you're gonna lose money for a while, it sounds like to me. You gotta break that cycle.
That's why I'm asking, should we invest in a fuel truck?
You need to break that, if that alone would solve it, yes. I'm not sure that alone solves it. You've gotta figure out why you're not selling jet fuel.
And going back to Con Air, I'd find out what they're paying, and even if you were losing a few cents a gallon, and you can capture that business and capture that volume, now the fuel company is gonna give you
Federal
trucks
taxes
for
still
very,
being paid,
yeah,
right?
you're getting money coming into the state that's gonna eventually flow back to you. So that conversation is very important, because you got somebody here who's going through a lot of fuel.
We've gotta move on from fuel. George?
Well, one quick question about the fuel. We get a, sorry, it's quick. All those private jets out there in the summertime, where are they fueling? Are they coming up here or they're not fueling at all?
Generally, they're feeling.
Okay, so they're pulling up to our
They
pump.
gotta pull up the pump.
We've got
You
everything.
tow them over there, they've gotta
Well, actually,
park there. You flag
generally,
'em.
we're gonna park them there.
Right.
Everything.
A lot of them are
G5s, you know.
quick turns, which, you know, you're just queuing them up, so, I mean, yeah, we make it work to the least inconvenience,
Yep,
but occasionally there's an
yep, there's two of them are there, right? Two of them show up at the same time.
We can park two at the same time.
George, do you have any other questions?
So businesses, you buy and sell or lease airport space and then put up buildings on them? What kind of businesses are in these buildings?
MROs, maintenance repair operations are in them, FBOs are in them.
Like the Northrop, is that at LAX or?
That's at Hawthorne,
Hawthorne, yeah.
which is next LAX.
Okay.
That Tesla is in that hangar.
Mhm.
that we have. They have a big presence out in Hawthorne. So private or public or different enterprises.
Anything
Part
else,
of-
George?
No.
What I was gonna add there is that a lot of airports, because of their history, have found themselves in possession of lots of vacant buildings that are essentially now free resources to use to attract others. We've never had that, so now we're in the position of
Competing
building something
against those.
is expensive versus something that other airports have as a free resource.
Thank you. You're up to bat.
I just would, capturing those dollars, federal dollars, from wherever they come from, increased employment is important, and being able to utilize those to find out what is the biggest amenity that we are going to add value to this airport. I'm hearing hangar, I'm hearing fuel. And they will help spin us into a whole new area.
Good summary.
And rental car.
In rental car,
That
but
has
that's,
to be,
Yeah,
we-
you got
we're-
it.
yeah, we'll set sail on that before Memorial Day. So, gentlemen, anything else in closing from you? Thank you.
Hey, Adam, Andrew's been kind enough to stick with us for 2 hours. Can we offer him an opportunity?
Sure.
Name of your company?
Okay, folks,
Research Corporation.
here, folks, if we can, just have one person at a time speak. Andrew, do you have
Just
any?
for general questions regarding airport ops and potential growth opportunity, I'm with Jeff, I mean, what I'm getting is fuel and hangars, and potentially there's opportunity for business development on the site of the airport. What I'm seeing, like, I'm looking at the Sawyer Airport in Marquette, Michigan, it's shocking to see how much industry they have in and around the airport that are clearly
That's
using
to
it
Barry's
for
point.
logistics.
Isn't Sawyer, former military base?
military base.
Right, so that's all the free real estate that came at no cost.
Yeah.
Directly east of us, and they're bringing their 747s in there.
Okay,
Anything else?
No, that's all for me.
Well, what's the reliever airport closest to here? You know, the designated reliever airport?
I do not know.
Okay.
What is it? Is it port of refuge, so to speak?
Well, you'd be a reliever for Traverse City, but if that needed a reliever airport.
They come here.
all right, okay. I think we're out of time. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I really appreciate you, making time.
Our pleasure.
Thank you. Biz?
All right, next meeting, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I really
Sure.
appreciate it, yes.
Nice meeting you.
Actually, we're flying back to Brookridge Airport, southwest of downtown.
Oh,
Take care, all.
Thank
Thank
you.
Yeah. Take care, everybody.
Text
Yep, you too.
I must have already, I brought a truck.
Really?
Albert, thanks.
Take care.
Hey, no,
A lot of people, I think,
a meeting
Rose,
Rose
paving?
Rose
go
paving.
on
Yeah,
and
yeah,
say
I bought a truck from them.
4-day or 3-day pass.
Oh,
Like,
Yeah, they're good guys. He stole
We
it.
do.
If they had, if
No,
they
yeah,
had.
so Rose, he used to live in our neighborhood.
Okay.
And then,
Because then they could, we could fly into Manistee, pick you up, do your 4-day stay, we got restaurants.
all right, take care, all.
Well, I know that.
Sorry, we should try to figure it out.
Tony, thanks.
Down there. Hey, Lindsay.
Yeah.
They do it, I mean, international.
Morning, Susan.
Yeah, which I don't know why.
Yeah.
I mean, they're one of the top and everything.
Yeah.
I
They
thought.
got 2, well, they got 3.
Morning, good day.
They have hired their own.
Afternoon, Lindsay.
Yeah.
It was a fishing trip.
It was good, we had a lot of fun, didn't catch many fish.
You're leaving. Not like they're coming in the middle of it.
We had a good time.
Okay, public comment, is that, where we are in the meeting, I believe? Okay, is there any public comment?
Call the order. Yes, we did. We did already. We did that.
Okay,
Thanks, Andrew.
okay, thank you, Andrew.
See ya.
Is there anyone on, our Zoom, Barry?
Stephanie Ward has been listening
Great,
from Meeting House.
okay, wonderful. Stephanie, do you have any public comment?
Nope, I'm all good, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Approval of minutes. Anyone have any questions on the minutes that were provided? Okay, if we don't have any questions, we're seeking a motion to approve the minutes.
We'll make that motion.
Second that.
Thank you. Made and seconded. Voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Carried. Treasurer's report.
Okay, you got your January 2025 accounts payable that I just need you to approve, and those include the January corporate site, which is on order. So, 464,1041, did anybody have any questions on any of that?
So there was a point in time where we were 2 months in arrears, we've caught up on that.
Yep,
in
so we
contours.
submitted December, we're just waiting for the December reimbursement, and once we get that, then we will make the January payment. Time that it's like a 21 day turnaround from the time it's.
Or at least it was
Yeah.
until current stuff going on in Washington, so since this is grant funded, I'm not sure if it will be as timely for a while until things settle down.
Okay, but Susan and Barry, you're comfortable with the status each?
It's as good as we can get, it's just,
Okay. Is there a motion? This is A, Treasurer's Report A, Accounts Payable, General Fund.
Yeah, I'll move we pay the bills.
Mr. Adamson? Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Jeff Downs? Ms. Goodman?
Yes.
Ms. Manistee?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Okay, B, January 25, Accounts Payable, Fund 481. Okay, nothing to approve there. Let's go to C, Financial Statements.
Yep, so you'll see your financial statements, the revenue and expenditures, and for your trial balance. So, you can see above your revenue, there is the 2 months of October and November for your federal AES service. So then when you look at down below, you also see the 1.8 million And that's what we're waiting for to come back, is that next month before we can release, January. So year-to-date, we've got 1.8 million.
Uh-huh.
Oh, it would be, can you do the revenue and expenditure?
Well, it's also
It's
spring
all
here,
from the
so-
trial balance, so, yeah. Yeah, so we're just waiting.
And does that cause us any penalty? Is there any interest that, Contour would charge us if we don't pay them within so many days?
No.
Okay, well, Susan, you're satisfied, we'd seek a motion?
Yes, my only thing, and I did reach out to Barry, is that, I don't know if you have a contact at Contour, ask them about their monthly payments that I haven't received, and I just sent the January back to them again this morning as a reminder that their balances, I haven't received anything from them.
I mean, we can escalate it, but they are known to pay slow.
Okay.
They haven't paid for fuel for October or November either.
Okay.
Now, it may be related to the fact that we were behind on paying them,
Right,
so
right.
I haven't been
Right.
wanting to push until
Right.
we
Well,
got
me
caught up,
either,
which we
so-
are now.
Which we are, so,
So now is probably the time to ask.
okay.
So they were 90 days plus behind on some payments to us?
They haven't paid us anything yet.
Can we maybe discuss how long we wanna wait before we ring an alarm?
I don't think we want to wait any longer. Well, we've now essentially caught up through the AAS payments.
Yeah, so they have their October, November, and December payments.
Right.
So I kind of thought that once they received their first payment, then they would release October at least, and did that, and then when they got their second payment, I thought, okay, well, they've gotten their third payment from us, and we.
So,
Do you have a contact for the controller over there?
Well, I
Who we waiting
think
on?
my point was not that we should wait longer, is that, Susan, maybe we should have not waited as long before escalating it. That's the question that I'm presenting to the group.
we were behind on paying them much larger sums of money.
Right, they're,
So
yeah.
we didn't really have a leg to stand on. Now, it wasn't our issue per se, but now that everything's caught up, we actually have a leg to stand on, and I am intending to follow up with Ben, I think is appropriate at this point, and I'll CC you on that.
And
you
I'll
can
forward
follow.
the one that I just sent them again
Okay.
today as a reminder.
Okay. But as I said, they've also not paid on the FBO side for fuel they've purchased, so I've got multiple incentives.
But we've paid them for multiple months,
We are now caught up, yes.
and they haven't paid us anything. How long ago did we make our first payment to them?
November that it finally went?
Yes.
November.
So we did make some payment to them,
Yes.
December, January.
We were behind, but we were making payments through the process.
Yeah, I think 75 days is, you know, we've started paying them, and 75 days that have gone where they're not paying us, if I understand it correctly.
But from everything I know, this is how they operate, so. But others, any of their vendors and airports, they eventually pay.
Well, that's just my only concern, because then your profit and loss, I mean, they, through January, owe $101,000, so, you know, if you take out AES stuff, you're in the hole, or however you wanna say that, of $131,000 for your financials, but 101 of that is the core. You know, part of that is also because, you know, we pay the insurance ahead of time, so, you know, if you look at your insurance, it's that, and then we also pay a couple other things 100%, so it's front loaded, so every month that number's gonna kind of adjust, and, you know, eventually we'll go back up, but that's where, that
Maybe
was my
that's
only
a second
concern.
item we can talk about at our budget committee.
Just, but otherwise, everything else is good. My only concern with that.
Okay, so that's C. Need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
I'll second.
Mr. Adamdale?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Jetta? Goodman?
Yes.
Ms. Manistee?
Yes.
Mr. Peabody?
Yes.
Okay, we are on to the, executive committee reports. And maybe, if the group is agreeable, I don't think any of the,
The transition committee was the only one that met.
right. So we'll get to transition committee, but maybe, if we can take a moment here, and if the members of the committees are agreeable, could we establish, at least here in the near term, getting regular monthly meetings of our committees to convene while we're in this transitionary period and looking at, everything that's before us? So, with that, the executive committee, we have myself, Dylan, and George. Guys, would you be willing to meet for an hour once a month? Okay.
Yeah.
And when do you want to do that? Let's just,
Why don't we, wanna do that right now, or do you wanna handle that offline?
well, we can handle it offline
By
if we
next
would
meeting.
like. Why don't I ask this? Are all the committees, capital, budget, bylaws, rental car and transition, are you all willing to meet, once a month here for, say, the next 6 months? And, we'll have regular reports at this meeting. We can handle scheduling them, offline, but the expectation would be that each committee would meet before, March.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that okay with you, Karen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Transition committee, so that was our meet and hunt.
Well, I was gonna say, since you sent out something rental car related, do you wanna talk about that at that point in the agenda, the rental car committee? Not committee
Sure.
specifically, but it's initiated from the committee work.
Sure, Barry, thank you. So this morning, I emailed all of you, what Cody Watson sent over the weekend. And, Cody is, in a position where he has financing approval, and it would be willing to serve as a, rental car, agency here. His, quantity, is between 15 to 20 cars that he would be willing to commit to coming out of the gate. He said that he can ramp up that demand, in very short order, so if he looks at, bookings, if we get Contours forward bookings and sees that supply isn't enough to meet demand, through Stellantis, he can ramp up, within a week or two. And that shouldn't be a problem by looking at forward bookings. He also, has an employee that, he's in the process, or a future employee that he's in the process of, hiring. He's identified a prospect and is talking with them. Add a new person that could be available here at the airport to, check people in and check people out, and would be, available on site, an hour before and an hour after departures. And then that person would go back to Watson, Manistee, but be available to take calls. Cars would be serviced and washed, at his dealership down there. He would have an online presence and a mobile app. We have a new website that would be, created in an online booking system. He also is very interested, and it would be his preference, to use a national chain. But to this point, he has not, identified one. To the extent one would become available, he would want to move as quickly as possible, franchise. So, that's where he is, I think, Barry. There's, you know, if we wanna move forward, perhaps our rental car committee should meet again. There's some process and procedure, I think, that you shared with us, so that be compliant. I don't think we can enter into an exclusive and preclude somebody else, but we can set some minimum standards that anybody who set up shop here would have to meet, if I understand that correctly. So this group, ultimately, those standards would be rewritten, and it would come back to this group for adoption as that process. Okay.
I guess in reading through what he wrote, I think his last question is probably something that should be discussed.
Right.
Because that's, I mean, from a timing perspective, want him to start sooner rather than later. We need to start that discussion.
Well, I don't have, is his last question in there where he has requested that the airport not charge him?
Well, I'll read it.
Thank you.
The only question I have remaining from my end is if the airport is going to charge a surcharge or tax to the rental agency. If so, I do not see a way to make this work financially. Please let me know your thoughts and if you or the board have any other questions.
So that's a discussion point here.
And we currently at an airport have a 10% fee for all vendors that operate here. So
And those,
currently that.
those vendors are,
applies to- huh?
those vendors are, can you?
So right now it's rental car and the soda machine and the candy machine.
Okay.
But Contour's not classified as a vendor.
No, they're not.
Okay, and Orchard Beach would not be classified as a vendor.
Correct.
Okay.
But the current rental group is being charged.
Yes, and that fee has been in existence for
And
practically forever.
and that agreement's been between Orchard Beach Aviation and the vendor, correct? Not them with the authority?
No,
It's
they
with the
write
authority?
a check to us quarterly for they collect 10% and remit it.
And that's amounted to about what? Barry?
Well, your budget's $13,000.
So that's a pass-through.
Yes.
Cody's question is, will we charge him his business to operate at the airport? And I think that we need to be clear that anything that's, we're gonna be charging his customers something, but we're not gonna charge Cody something.
Well, that's not the current language, is it, Barry?
No, that's what it is, but
Service
that's
fee.
it's a distinction because ultimately that 10% increases the cost to the customer.
Yeah.
And therefore, if he's trying to maximize his revenue potential, knowing that at some point he can't charge more than X,
Yeah.
10% reduces what he can profitably make.
Yeah.
I believe is his answer. I'm reading into that one sentence, all of that.
So a couple questions for the board. Would board entertain a scaled, fee schedule where, for an initial period of time, there may be no fee, and 6 months or some period of time, subject to whatever the group decides, it increases?
I guess I rent a lot of cars, okay? And every single invoice I get, whether it be from National or Avis, has the base rate, and then there's 4 or 5 additional fees. So if Cody can't make it work at a competitive rate, say with Traverse City, $46 a day, and the customer is gonna turn away at the point where you add 10 or 20% on top of that for their rental, then I think that's when the airport would have to eat that, but I think that he should be able to make it work with that pass-through fee. When we're having these discussions about how the airport is gonna make money, this is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, this is where we have to we have to get something out of this,
Every little
because they're
bit.
taking up space in the
Well,
parking lot.
the current model supports it.
Right.
Why wouldn't the future model?
Is he talking a larger, he's talking a
Higher
larger
volume.
pool, maybe? What do we have now?
I think presently Greg has 2 cars
Yeah.
insured and owns 16 or
Yeah.
a dozen.
So he's talking 20 vehicles.
Roughly doubling the capacity in the summer.
So it's, so there's not a reduction in Cody's income. It's entirely passed on to the customer.
To the consumer, yeah. It's that, they call it airport fees or airport concession fees,
Yeah.
or whatever they call them, yeah.
Yep.
There's
Airport
fees.
concession fee, airport access fee, vehicle license recovery fee, auto rental tax recovery, and then there's state tax. So, I mean, my advice for Cody would be to put that as a line item on your invoice.
Mhm.
Unless he's
Absolutely.
costing it out at a higher rate. I mean, it's like, I don't know, I don't understand why that rate would be so high that wouldn't be, you know, comparative to others.
Yeah, I mean, the daily rental rate for this one was Huntsville Airport, $35 a day. International Falls was much higher than that. So, I mean, I think that he's got to price it competitive based on his local market. I think if people want to fly into Manistee, they'll rent a car here.
Mm-hmm. You're kind of
From a
stuck.
commercial standpoint, so, that's just the price, that is the price. So I think that the airport does need to get part of,
Something for the service,
I mean,
that
really-
let him make money with.
For Manistee to fly it, I mean, people understand it's a smaller airport, we're not Chicago or Detroit or whatever. And for a car rental, let's say it costs you $200, $20. That's a $10 airport fee or concession fee or whatever he wants to call
10%.
it. Access fee, yeah. I mean, it's not like your rental car is $200 and your airport fee is $100,
right.
out of 50%. Yeah.
I don't think
So I think we need to, speak with him and have that discussion with him, a line item that needs to be in there as part of it, the tax.
I don't think he understood it was a pass-through from how he answered his question.
Exactly.
I think it was,
So as long as he understands that, I think he'll be okay with it, but
Yeah.
I'll have to talk to him.
I definitely don't think we need to charge him $10,000 just to say,
No.
rent your car from Cody
It's our
Watson when you
it's
fly
our
in.
pillow tax.
Yeah, yeah. But again, if that scales him out, and he's gotta get every penny he can out of this, then, well, maybe he needs to get some Hyundais and not
Yeah, I
a
was just,
Grand Wagoneer.
yeah, kind of what I'm thinking, what is he costing the
Do they base that on the size of car, or it's
Yeah.
standard?
It's based on-
It's a-
Well,
yeah,
it's percentages.
Right,
You can,
bigger car, smaller car, yeah.
yeah.
Barry, what other,
It's been a
is there
few
any
years
other
since I
guidance?
rented, but I remember.
I mean, I'm just thinking about things that are in our current minimum standards for car rental. We currently would require that he enter a lease and have a counter space somewhere where he operates.
Do we have that presently for Victoria?
It is, the language of it says for sublease from an existing tenant. So currently, Victorian subleases through Orchard Beach, which is what Jeff was referring to. So they could sublease under Contour's contract or have their own. And then in the exchange, we provide them X number of parking spots for their inventory. Kind of what the current setup looks like. And yet, all can be changed, but
So it's the consensus of the group to keep the tax at 10% as a pass-through to the customer, not intended to be a fee for Watson's for doing business. Correct.
Correct.
Correct. Okay?
We had that discussion with him.
Okay. Great. So then,
I guess I'll throw in there, and I think it's where you were going with a comment earlier, is often it is not uncommon to entice a new business, to give them a break in fees for a shorter period of time. They get up and running, but long-term, requiring them to pay. So, you know, there could be potentially some along those lines that still, long-term, get us the revenue that we're looking for or need, but short-term, provide some relief to get them started up.
So provide him maybe 6 months to get ready and then move into,
That's what I said was a scaled program. I mean, if we rewind the clock, literally 90 minutes ago, we heard from an operator and members of this body how important it was that we have marketable rental cars that meet today's demand. Now we have a local business who's going to the bank for 20 cars for $800,000. This board says we don't wanna give up $5,000 to chip in a portion of 6 months of 10%.
I don't know if anybody said that, what I would say, he's
Well,
got a capital outlay.
that's what it meant, keep the 10% tariff, that's what it results in monetarily.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I see where you're going with that, but, I think we were just saying that it's not like,
Well,
you know,
It's
this
not
is like a
off the top of
pass-through,
his
this is
gross,
like,
he
yeah,
charges $50
just so that he's
a day.
aware of that,
It's
but
a
we can
$5 pass-through.
yeah, but we could start him at a lower rate, that's.
well, right, but what he could do is charge the tariff, keep half of it and give half, and that's how he would make more money, which would be his incentive
Right.
to making the $800,000 investment.
Well, he said he's gotta invest money in the TSD and a few other things too, so
mhm.
maybe that gets equalized then.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting to the group that we zero it out in perpetuity. What I was saying is there a graduated scale, I think, with my words, that the board would consider.
Well, I think it's okay to, you know, promote local and let him establish himself. You know, either 5% or start it at 0 and then move it up in 6 months. In 6 months, he'll know.
And frankly, you know, the flip side of the coin is this. He's making an $800,000 investment, and really what we're talking about is 5% delta for 6 months, and our budget's $13,000, and it's half of that, it's $7,000. It really probably doesn't move the needle too much for this airport or for him. It's more a goodwill gesture from each of the business people, so I guess what I would say is, why don't we just have another conversation with them and come back to the group? I would just like to know from the group, I think there's a desire that we bring a greater quality of rental car service and do it, you know, and have it active. What I've said is by Memorial Day, so that we're, you know, in shape for the summer season.
Yeah.
But I will add that this is still significantly less than what we're looking for, because it doesn't have
A national
ability
franchise.
to book.
But hopefully this will play into that.
Well, Cody has said it would be his
He
preference
would, yeah,
to have a national franchise because he
would we
sees
want
the value.
to try to hold him to that in some time period? And until that time period, we're not gonna actively pursue other options, but after a certain period of time, if he's not able to deliver on that, would we, as an airport, want to be pursuing something else that does check off all of our boxes?
Well, I think this is a great conversation. What I will say is this, is two things. One, whether Enterprise, you know, we heard from Hertz, they said, we don't want to be in this market. So it's, in my opinion, difficult to penalize a local operator if he goes, and there's really only 3 or 4 groups, right? Budget and Avis are 1, National and Enterprise are 2, Hertz is 3, and then you have Fox and 6. And if he makes 5 phone calls and strikes out with all five, because those companies have made a business decision that they don't wanna be in this market. I don't wanna penalize a local operator who just invested close to $1 million. I wanna be. That's the flip side of it. So, you know, he's expressed to me that he sees value in having their business model, having their reservation systems, and where I left it with him is, why don't we really pin our ears back in the next 30 to 45 days and aggressively, you know, be like chihuahuas nipping at the heels of these rental car companies. Can you do this in Manistee? And he wants them. And so I don't know, Barry, to kind of execute your suggestion, because I think you're right, we do want that. How do we balance that? What's beyond his control, right?
Right.
Well, you're
But as we know, if someone isn't actively out there trying to find something, it's not probably just going to show up someday. So if we think this is good enough and we say, okay, this is as good as we can do, and we stop looking, that's what we will have, and we hope that he's able to.
Well, then do we use this tariff as a tool and say, if you get a national franchise, we'll rebate you back half of your, 5%?
I think he's going to develop a model that will either allow it or not. When it's all said and done. I mean, he's gonna have the real-time picture to sell that program to a national, whoever it is.
So,
Certain nationals don't want a local operator. It's Enterprise's person. Cody's foreclosed from operating it.
Very few support a franchise model. Most of them are company-owned.
Budget Avis, I think, is the
so
one that I know of.
a good process is RFP processes. So as a business or as the airport, we might want to put out RFP in 5 years. So then even for Cody, if, because we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars buying his vehicles. And so we have like a 5-year window. So even if 5 years from now, he has those going back and he can sell them. I mean, he invests a lot, but he'll get that product on the other end too.
Lisa, you commented that the county has a relationship with Enterprise.
But we have a relationship with Enterprise on the fleet side.
That's fine. I think my point is, there's a warm body on the other end of the telephone that'll answer it.
But we couldn't, they wouldn't
Yeah.
work with us. We have 15, 20 vehicles.
Well, here's my question. Has the county called Enterprise and said, can you put us in contact? Because I think Enterprise is corporate. I don't think they would allow Cody to.
Yeah, Barry had a number 2 or a contact with Enterprise from the rental side, not the fleet side.
So I don't think Enterprise, I could be wrong, but I don't think Enterprise would send a franchise to Cody. So I think it's kind of either Cody or Enterprise. Where I go wrong, somebody tell me. I mean, they would both have equal opportunity, but is the market big enough? So are we convinced that the door is closed with Enterprise and they genuinely don't have any interest? Because I would hate for Cody to make an investment in June. We learn that oh yeah, we'll come.
My experience is that doors open and close for those companies based on a lot of factors, and 6 months, it may be closed now, in 6 months, they may be knocking at our door.
But did they return our call? Has somebody spoken with the appropriate person?
They did not return our call, so I would say the door is closed now.
But Adam, I think, as Karen alluded to, an RFP process at some point in time, because if these companies see we have someone in here, or, we now have a bigger commercial airline or carrier that's bringing this in, so things are going to change, that, Enterprise a year and a half down the road might say, hey, now we're interested.
No different than our essential air service. We had 3 bids the last go around.
And that's just, it's good practice, you do it all the time, you know, after a period of time, you should always look,
Thank you.
especially with public funding.
Right. Okay.
So it sounds good now, it sounds like we can talk to Cody, we can talk about, you know, giving him a bit of a break, possibly, but he has to know that it'll eventually be something he'll have to pass through. And he's a businessman, he
He'll
knows
figure that
it,
out, yeah.
it's not 100, yeah.
Well, then we will work to, Barry, is this reasonable? Should we work to come back?
That's why we have a car rental committee.
Right. But, so the car rental committee's here in the room. Do you think, Cindy, we can huddle up and meet with Barry and talk with, Cody and come back to the full board by next month's meeting with, a draft agreement? Is that what we would revise our standards to and have something for consideration?
Yeah.
Is that okay with you, Barry? Yeah. Okay. Solved. Anything else there? All right. Well, that's exciting. Transition committee, should we touch on that?
I think a brief update is appropriate.
Okay, so Mead and Hunt, has a draft report that I actually included for all the board, in this packet. The draft report that they shared with us was, put in the 288-page PDF that I emailed to all our board members last week. So you can review that there. And if my memory serves correct, Mead and Hunt has a target date of February 24th, is that right, Barry? Where they want to release their initial draft report.
So I would say this isn't the report, this is really the data that they're gathering from all of the other airports.
Right.
They're turning that into a report.
Which would be released. Right.
Yep.
So included in your packet is what we have in our possession at this time. And, 2 weeks from today, we would have their draft full report with narrative.
With the goal then of iterating through that, potentially with the committee once or twice, so that something is final for the board a week before the March meeting.
March 10th. Right.
The meeting is the 17th. A final version should be to the board as of the 10th. And Stephanie, I see you took yourself off mute. Do you have anything to add?
Nope, you summarized. I was just gonna say that we are planning to have the report for the board on the 10th, so you got ahead of me.
Could you repeat that, Stephanie? My hearing's bad.
Just very, summarized our timeline. We're planning the 24th to have the draft report to the transition committee. We've built a weekend for your review, for us to then make any edits, and then have the final draft for the 10th for the full board, and then that's in anticipation of making a formal presentation to the board on the 17th, so.
Great, thank you. And I think on that, mark your calendars, that'll be the first meeting that we implement our 9 a.m. meeting schedule, Stephanie, so just be mindful of that change.
Yep, I've got that on my calendar. Thanks for reminding us.
Thank you. Anything else that we should touch on there, Barry? Okay, great. Well, old business, I think you'd be up to bat on the boiler, hey?
So last month, I mentioned to the board that the boiler, two boilers we have in the terminal that mostly are used to power our sidewalk heaters, but are our backup heat, because the entire terminal has in-floor radiant heat, even though that's a secondary heating source. Geothermal, which works through the HVAC units in the ceilings, is the primary source. That our general, HVAC contractor, Custom Sheet Metal, gave us a quote on that. It was significant. The board requested that I get alternative quotes, which are in your packet. Try to bring those up. So we had, so Custom Sheet Metal's original, it's actually broken across two different quotes. There's a replacing the boilers, $34,800, and then there's tying in the controls for the heater, for the work on the pavement heating, another $7,000. So roughly $42,000 for their original quote. In addition to that, we had 3 other firms come out too that gave us quotes. So this is from More Mechanical. Their total was $28,160. They're the low bidder on this. And quite honestly, I actually feel the best about what they did. They came here multiple times. They contacted and actually worked with the original engineer who designed the terminal. They reached out and got that information. They actually probably understand how the system's supposed to work better than Custom Sheet Metal does at this point, even though. So they did a very thorough job in their process. And then Hearst Mechanical also came out, and theirs was in the same ballpark as Custom Sheet Metal, a little over $42,000. So I guess they're technically the highest total, but about the same as Custom Sheet Metal. So based on these 3 quotes, I'm comfortable saying that I would recommend More Mechanical. Now, the further question I would pose to the board is, do we replace this at all, or do we just, it is currently turned off. I've turned it on once or twice when snow and ice built up on the front entrance, set off. It has definite issues. It's, More Mechanical said, this is a safety hazard, you better turn it off, because you're actually leaking carbon monoxide into the building. So it's not functional. It can be used sporadically to accomplish its goal. And it's also a big ticket item that was unbudgeted.
So can you walk through that, budget process for us? And, if we would approve this, do we just have to go to the county and say, we need some money? Or are we gonna pull it from somewhere else in the budget? And if we pull it from somewhere else in the budget, then what do we forego?
Generally, we would either reallocate some other line item or pull it from fund balance, which for us right now is probably technically negative. Although I think by the time the auditors come around, we always have somewhat of a slight positive, on paper at least. Or we seek outside funding, which county or some other fund.
Do you have a recommendation on, where you would, pull the funds from elsewhere in the budget?
No.
Okay.
Our budget is lean, so there isn't really fungible sources that we can pull it from.
And what about the fund balance is negative? Is it or isn't? Is there, if they submitted the bill?
Well, right now, because Contour is $100,000 in arrears, it is negative. But if you look at on an accrual basis,
And
we would anticipate by the end of the year that on an accrual basis, our fund balance would be slightly positive.
yeah, but, today, anyway, you're saying by 10 months from now, we'd be, The end of
He's
the
talking the
fiscal
end of
year,
the audit,
September
right?
30,
September 30th.
the end of the fiscal year?
So, when the audit for fiscal year '24 concludes, it will likely show a slight positive balance. Therefore, given our budget is a break-even budget, I would anticipate that at the end of this fiscal year, we would be in the same situation. Often during the year, we are negative
I
on
heard,
a cash basis especially.
I once heard a gentleman say, "I'm just a simple farm boy."
And we all do that.
You can't
We do
rob my
exactly
line.
that. We all laugh.
I've got
But what I'm really getting at is if this board approves this expense today, and they come out and do the work, and we owe them $40,000 in 30 days, where are those dollars coming from in our budget? How are we gonna physically pay the bill? That's my question.
The reality is that the county is our bank account. So when we go negative, we're essentially borrowing from the county. We are positive, they are holding our funds. So we operate in a area where this theoretically isn't a problem. But we've recently forced onto the county some extremes in that bank account, because they are now funding $400,000 to $700,000 a month that wasn't there before. So that's a Lisa and county commissioner's question.
I mean, if Susan was here, we would ask her.
How
yeah.
are you gonna shuffle it?
Yeah,
It needs to be done. So I would say go with the Morse, was it?
more mechanical.
More mechanical.
Mechanical, yeah.
I mean, that's a huge,
If that other one's sitting there at the same age, it's probably waiting for.
Barry, my only question would be, they were all given the same, it's all apples to apples,
Yes.
just, okay.
is there any other funding out there or grants that could be asked for?
None that I know of. That doesn't mean that there aren't, but
Anything left in the ARPA?
there's potentially a few dollars left in there, and I would definitely say we should exhaust that, first.
I'll ask Susan.
Yeah,
We'll figure it out.
Here's one as well, for the sidewalk situation, would request that as a safety grant through the revenue sharing board as well.
That's a good point.
Breaking that one
Wow.
out, it's been a while since, but
Oh,
we don't pay for things after the fact.
Right.
So you'd have to wait.
Well, you're looking at how long now between,
When do they meet next?
well, we meet tonight, but it's not
We-
when the deadline is.
No, so grants will go out, they'll be due in March, and we will
Award.
due in March. April will be when we listen to, and then June, they're awarded.
Allocated.
So we would award in June.
And work can't commence prior to the award?
No,
No.
no, we don't, it's
What
not
percentage
reimbursing.
of that bill would be available for the sidewalk aspect? I mean, 28,000, 6 of it, would 9 of it? Always the question.
You could say all of it is,
Yeah, it's a dedicated boiler for the sidewalk and alternate for the building.
right. I mean, it all depends on how you wanna spin it.
Chances are you wouldn't get 28, but, you know,
Something's better
so
than
that's
Yeah.
why he's asking for
I mean, that,
what
I think
portion
that's
of that would be.
strategizing around what we could get based on, knowing a little bit more about kind of how that board works. I haven't attended in a few years, so I don't know if the makeup of that board I know has changed.
since that time, so I don't know.
You have
Without anything for the community.
positive availability.
I was just trying to think, there's nothing,
So,
not really been,
given that we're February,
nothing.
even if this were approved today,
Probably won't go till spring.
it wouldn't go till spring, you know. It's not turned on from April through October. So
Is there a limit?
waiting for something.
Is there a limit on how long the bid's good for? Does it say in there 30 days?
Just refresh them.
Generally, they are but if you let them know what you're up against,
Right.
they'll generally extend.
If we think it's gonna be qualified for a revenue sharing grant, then
Could be.
we should submit that, and if it's not, it's,
Covered either way,
yeah.
but you have to wait. Again, we probably wouldn't get there till the point in time when
June.
What's,
the days aren't
Mid-
long enough.
it's mid-February and I saw a snow shovel, so, I mean,
We're covered.
we're talking about keeping a sidewalk cleared, right?
Right, no, I'm,
So, I think we can handle it now, we're through the worst of the winter.
Yes.
And, I'll say that, we'll probably get 3 feet
Yeah,
of snow tonight,
thanks.
sorry everybody. But I just think if we can get the grant money, let's go for the grant money, and then otherwise, the county's gonna have to step up and pay for it.
So was that a motion?
No, you don't need a motion.
Yeah, to accept the grant, right?
To-
Or to accept which bid?
Well, we accept the bid for the purposes of applying for the grant.
I think it would help me ensuring that More Mechanical is willing to hold the price if they know they're gonna get it.
Well, I would say that, we go back to More Mechanical, say we like your bid, we're gonna be going out for grant funding, and here's, at this time, 3 weeks before the grant application is due, you ask them to refresh their bid, and if it goes up 10%, then that's what you submit.
Why don't we try to have More Mechanical lock in this
Yeah.
price today and not bother going back and renegotiating with them?
We like your price, we're gonna
Yeah.
let us,
Why don't we ask them?
Well, they're gonna have to order equipment, and in order for that to happen, they need money.
They're not gonna have to order equipment because we're gonna tell them they're not gonna be doing the work until after the grant is either A, approved or rejected, and then B, they'll just do the work.
And that's in
But-
June, right?
But the price of the material
Oh,
is what the bid is priced on,
yeah.
Are you opposed to asking them that?
kind of.
Well,
Why?
no. What I'm hearing is you're gonna do the job no matter what, right?
absolutely.
So, if you make a motion today to accept their bid as presented, and then get with them and say, the authority approved your bid, however,
Pending,
we're not planning on doing the work until June,
Because we're looking for grant funding.
and see if they will hold that price. If they say no, then you come back. But generally, they're gonna be like, they understand. They've done work with us before, and so they are aware of how our
Systems
funding
go.
happens. So I would do that to prevent anything from changing.
It makes very good sense to me.
The motion is,
Accept More Mechanical's bid.
And not commence work until June.
June.
And if More Mechanical doesn't like that, they can say, well, we need to start sooner, and,
Or when
I'm
funding
sure they
is
don't.
available.
I think that's a better way to put it.
but not later than, I mean, they won't give you
Later
a blank
than.
check.
If they've done work with us before, and they're a pretty good-sized company, they know they're gonna do this work. They may just order these boilers and have waiting, that'll be the price. And then-
It could be on their shelf.
It's a 2-week lead time, yeah, so. Probably a good-sized boiler rather than just something, I don't know.
Dylan, I don't fully understand your concern. Share with me what you believe to be the downside of Lisa's suggestion.
Well, there's not a downside of Lisa's suggestion. All I'm saying is if we tell them we wanna go with them, but we're not gonna be able to have the money to move until June, the price of those boilers and equipment is gonna go up. That's just the way that works.
Sure.
So when we go back and submit the grant application, we're gonna have to have some contingency in there to say the price of the boiler today is more than it was yesterday.
I think the point you're missing is we're asking the vendor to lock in the price presented. The vendor's free to say no.
Yeah.
I hear what Dylan's saying, it's like,
Yeah, I understand
you
that
know,
too.
it is a thing of, they can lock it in, but, you know, it might be not worth doing it if they get a 10% increase on the boilers and all this different stuff. They
Yes,
might
but
kind
that's
of
their
say,
business decision to
Well-
make. They can come back to us and say, no, we've,
And then we may be here next month saying
Exactly.
they came back and said they need
Yeah, we-
10% more, and to accommodate that, and then we can have
that's
that.
for
As long as
them
we're-
to tell us.
As long as we're open with the fact that we're gonna go out for grant funding,
Yes.
and we may have to ask them to refresh this bid in 3 months, then I'm fine with it.
do they have shelving fees some places, like when you make big purchases and stuff? If you're not gonna use it right away, they shelf it, and so you pay a shelf fee.
You know, not to oversimplify things, but what is the harm to say they've tendered a proposal?
Right.
We
Accept
accept your
it.
proposal.
Mhm.
We can't start work until June. Is that acceptable to
Post
you?
June 9th.
And then we'll await their response. And I can't think
Then-
through all their business maturations.
Do we need to authorize you to put in a grant application? Or are you able to just do that?
For direct.
Generally, I can just do that.
Okay.
You need to approve any grant we get out of that process.
You
But
can
if you
apply, right?
want to, approve it free, that too, but.
So I would we move forward with More Mechanical's, proposal to replace the boilers and, move forward with securing funding for work to begin no later than June,
9th,
Ninth.
post-June 9th.
Not any time after June 9th for work to begin, not later than. When's your June meeting?
June
9th.
Okay.
Be after the 9th.
I'm just trying to keep this transparency equal here. So we took 3 bids,
Yep,
and so more came in less.
yep.
And none of these bidders know that we're going to move it out. So they didn't really bid based on situation. I mean, I'm just concerned, like, okay, so, well, I guess I'm just trying to work it through my head. If Moore comes back and says, sure, we'll stay at the same bid, we're golden.
Great.
Yeah.
If not, we can call everybody that bid and said, we're not gonna do the work to June. Would you like to rebid?
But all their bids could go up, so
And
mean,
they
they're all
might.
higher anyway,
Yeah,
so
it's not gonna matter.
I don't think it's,
Or
too much of
it
an
goes down
issue.
because it's slow time.
Okay, so we have a.
You live in.
I think we have a motion.
Yep.
And the motion is to award the contract to More Mechanical for work to start not later than June 5th.
No,
Not
before.
Yeah, right. Not before.
Yep.
That's the motion. I'll second it.
Great, thanks. We, call the roll?
Yep.
Mr. Adamdale?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Jeff Dowd?
Yes.
Goodman?
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky?
Yes.
Mr. Picardi?
Yes. Okay. Passes. Next.
Since we're to me again,
Mhm.
we're at the part of the agenda where I tend to talk more. Try to get this up on the screen. So on Friday, I submitted the following, which I sent to the board, the following grant proposal for this air service grant mentioned for the board the last 2 months. And the grant request is for a total of $400,000 to provide a revenue guarantee to a potential air carrier to provide service linking Milwaukee, Muskegon, Manistee, and Green Bay. Details of that to be determined. Internally, we put together essentially an RFP. We reached out to 4 air carriers, Muskegon and Manistee's current carriers, so that's Contour and Denver Air Connection, as well as Boutique and Cape Air. Boutique was the only one that got back to us in an affirmative manner. We've had some preliminary conversations with them, and they'd be willing to do this in our timeframes. They proposed some rates that I would want to negotiate further with them on. They seem a little bit high for what they're providing. But for the sake of getting this grant in, because none of this happens unless there's money to do it, Muskegon and I came up with what we have here. We got letters of support from Manistee Tourism. We got a letter of support from the Green Bay Airport. In fact, they're willing to provide a waiver of fees and up to $100,000 in marketing support for this. I suspect Milwaukee also has, most large airports have a program to incentivize new carriers, not much different than what we were talking about earlier with car rentals, as, you know, new guy, you get a little discount for a while. But it was nice to hear Green Bay do that. And it helps, I think, that Marty at Green Bay, who's the current Green Bay Airport Director, used to be the airport director at Muskegon. So there's actually some connections there. And then Muskegon also secured for us a letter of support from various state assembly persons and state senators to basically support this as well, including Vanderwall, who is also on our. So that went in. Their time frame is we should hear back within 2 weeks on this, and if we're successful, we can move forward with it. If not, move on. Any questions on that?
I have one question. I think, if memory serves me correct, that we selected Boutique immediately prior to Contour.
Correct.
And, are there any of the same concerns that remain with respect to Boutique status today that were present 6 months ago?
The fact that we selected them initially, I think, says that in general, we were happy with them. What we ultimately didn't like is that they weren't providing 30-seat jet service as being a big factor in that final decision.
And they couldn't guarantee those planes that.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't referencing any concerns that anyone around this table had. I was inquiring about concerns that others, the FAA or DOT.
This would not be with their twin-engine plane that supposedly is available.
This is single engine
This would be
over
their-
the lake?
It's what our previous guests flew in on. Is one of the most common turboprops out there for small-scale service.
And the passenger loads, that's like 9 people?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Does that
Well, that's a
undermine,
concern a little bit, if they stop here and Muskegon, right?
does that undermine us with our concern for the essential air service? Because we're going over Lake Michigan, and one of the criteria we have in that is twin engine. And all of a sudden, we're going to test the waters on something else with a single engine? Does that do more harm than good in the process of that?
Does not meet the level of service considered the minimum for essential air service. So no, it would not. If it were operating was a frequency that met the technicalities of essential air service, it could potentially. But the frequency here would be 1 a day, which is not the required 2 a day for essential air service. But that's a good question, and the types of things we should be thinking about.
What else should we be thinking about, Barry, that we may not know to think about on our agenda? What are we not asking that we should be?
If I knew that, I would have already incorporated it.
You mean as it relates to this?
So this is a incoming flight from Milwaukee or from Muskegon? We're doing a square?
The routing is to be determined.
Okay.
What I originally put out there was basically Milwaukee, Muskegon, Manistee, Green Bay, that route. Depending on circumstances, it may be a Muskegon, Milwaukee, Green Bay, Manistee. There are pros and cons to each of those.
Yeah.
And so this is for 1 year?
It's basically for a summer.
A season, I could say 1 season. And that starts in June and ends in September?
We jumped into it, given Barry the approval to, seek it, so
Yeah.
has anything changed?
Right.
And like anything, if we're awarded this grant, then the board will need to accept the grant, which is the point in time where we can say no.
Well,
No, I mean.
thank you for the point of information, I would.
At that point, I think you're gonna want
Yeah, you know, here's a question.
I don't think I
Is
read
there
those.
any cost to us, or is this 100, I view our budget as a little stressed, and I view the county's budget as maybe more stressed. And so I'm acutely sensitive to any cost that would result from this to our budget. So, can you help me to better understand where this may create costs that aren't budgeted for?
I'm not aware of any incremental costs that aren't currently budgeted. However, saying that, I would anticipate that some of our currently allocated marketing funds would help promote this. So that's splitting a pie in different chunks.
And what's the size of that pie? Because I think it's small. Marketing.
Our contribution is roughly 20,000. Contour's contribution obviously would not contribute to this, so Contour's contribution is 25,000. So the majority of the funds would still be going towards promoting Contour or the airport in general. I view there is a big win in saying we're an airport that you can choose to fly to Green Bay, Milwaukee, or Chicago from, as a marketing platform that is beneficial to Contour as well as the airport. On the positive side, this should generate some additional fuel sales. Well, I wouldn't expect a lot necessarily, but certainly some.
It seems to me, that it's an extremely short-term service offering of 3 months with no plan that I know of. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I'm unaware of how this is perpetuated.
Well, do you read it?
No, I'm
The
unaware.
whole point is that this is to achieve something that's sustainable and to test the waters. The data suggests that the fares people are currently paying would make it sustainable. if someone were willing to risk it. This is taking away the initial risk so that an air carrier like Boutique can test the waters and say, this is where I want to set my stakes to building a business around Lake Michigan. Without this, this would never happen, and we would be eternally at the risk of losing everything if we lost essential air service. This gives us a window of opportunity to potentially secure something that may be sustainable on its own, regardless of what happens to essential air service.
Let me be the devil's advocate. So if this proves successful in the test run, I could also argue that it puts us at risk for losing because they have proven we have a viable non-subsidized service as opposed to the subsidized service. Could be possibly the downside.
As long as it stays under the minimums of essential air service, it doesn't count.
But again, for proving something, I'm a free market guy, 100%. It could take the essential air service equation out possibly.
Yeah, but I hear Barry saying it stays under the radar if we keep at a certain level.
Well, you know, yes, that's clearly what Barry's saying. But I think, you know, at least from my vantage point, I think there's a tremendous asset in a real economic engine, which is 60 seats a day. And now what we are being evaluating is whether we want to divert marketing dollars from a 60-day a seat plane to a 9-passenger plane that runs for 3 months. And I think we have an anemic marketing budget where every dollar be measured and what the return on the dollar is. And, you know, I'm not necessarily opposed to this, but I question diverting marketing dollars from Contour, which already is increasing passenger count by 50%, to a 9-seat seasonal plane for 3 months. I don't know that it delivers the same amount of horsepower. It's Contour.
Is this grant associated with an automatic, we're gonna split the marketing? Or would we have to figure out how we're gonna market this if we get the grant?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part.
So the concern Adam's got is that it's gonna split our marketing budget. Does this, if we are awarded this grant, does it require us to split our marketing budget? Or can we make that choice at that time on how much we're gonna market this?
We're not committed to any
Advertising, no.
Yeah,
Advertising at all.
right.
Green Bay is actually potentially funding all of it with what they're
kicking in 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
I get it, but
That's,
does Green Bay have essential air service? Do they have,
Well, there,
it's their only, opportunity,
okay.
hence their proportional
Yeah.
investment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, I think we have a very small amount of resources dedicated toward a very large economic generator, which is 60. And I want to ensure, if this board moves forward with this, that we do the opportunity justice and really market it. But I am simply raising the point that we're gonna divert marketing dollars from Contour to this prospect, which is temporary service with very few seats. So, if that's the pleasure of the board to do, I think that's fine, but I just wanna say that you got $20,000, I don't know, Barry, what do you think's appropriate? Do you want 10 of it? Do you want 5 of it? What do you think is a proponent that we should reallocate away from Contour to this to really be meaningful?
I don't have an answer to that at this point.
Well, to me, that's an important question, because I wouldn't want to move forward with something not knowing how you're gonna fund it and market it and a plan to make it successful.
Well, I think that, that's something that we would discuss for, budgeting. I mean, we can choose our own, we can choose not to do anything, and hopefully all the marketing that's done through Milwaukee, if they're opposing, if they're gonna give 100,000, was it?
Green Bay.
Or Green Bay?
Green Bay.
Is that 100,000? I mean, supposedly.
It says up to,
You
no
know,
more details, I haven't read what their
you know, maybe we
incentive
only
program
need
is.
a couple thousand out of it, which
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with.
And Boutique could probably kick in on their marketing. I'm sure they're gonna wanna market themselves.
We wanna be over in this area.
Sure. Which could
Has
lead to other
Boutique-
cities,
Has
Detroit.
Boutique
They
said
were
that
interested
there's
in
a
it
marketing
before.
commitment?
No, they have not.
Mhm. You had
committed
connections
anything
there?
At this point.
Yeah,
They
So I
especially,
just, I don't know,
have an
Karen,
interest,
on
right?
$2,000, I don't know what that buys you to start up a marketing program in the
And I don't-
marketplace.
I don't hear that we're doing the major marketing. I hear that somebody else is gonna do it.
Well,
I mean,
if
we're
I
just
were
giving
Green
it good
Bay,
faith.
if I were Green Bay, I don't know that I would be advertising on this side of the pond, the Manistee residents, to do it. Maybe they'll geofence Manistee.
You
But
can flyer to Manistee, and there you
do
can
we
do this and this
want-
and this.
we're trying to get them over
We're trying
here.
to get Green Bay people to come here, so that's.
And Milwaukee.
I get it. I think, and I'll just say it one more time and then I won't say it again. There's an opportunity cost. If you spend $1 here, you're not spending it here, the budget is limited. So you can either go to Green Bay and say you've got 9 seats on a plane and I'm gonna spend money to fill that 9-seat, one-day a plane here. Or you can say I have 4 times as many seats on a plane and go fishing in Chicago and try to bring those people here with a bigger marketing effort. So if we're trying to determine what's gonna give the greatest return on investment of limited marketing dollars, that's
But you also
what I'm
have
putting
to-
out for consideration.
My point is, in doing that, we're putting all of our eggs into one basket called EAS. And I am concerned gravely that that program is not going to be there in the future. And we can just die, if that's what you want, or we can attempt to do some things. I'm sorry, I'm being a little strong in my wording there. Or we can attempt to do some things that try to prepare for the future in the long term.
Well, that's great, and I agree, and I appreciate the proactivity. It would put me at ease if there was an answer to my question of how are we gonna market it and what do you feel is an appropriate marketing spend at the front end? And there was a recommendation about what our plan would be to execute this.
As you said, there's an opportunity cost. I'm not going to invest a huge amount of time in this until we at least even have a grant.
Right, that's
Yeah,
what
we're
you
just
don't
discussing
know.
something.
Then
We're just-
we can
Maybe
figure
make
out
it happen.
what those details are, because I'm pulling away from other things as well.
Right.
And I know you haven't said that, you said that previously, as you kept concerns about me getting spread too thin because of this.
I think one thing to consider is, we also have other areas that can advertise for us in the community that should be pulling some of the weight on advertising.
Mhm.
Tourism.
Yeah.
Chamber.
Personally, I'm more of a Milwaukee or go over that, to Wisconsin, more than Chicago, personally. I mean, so there are people like that would prefer to stay away from Chicago.
I've had plenty of people ask me, when can we get over to Wisconsin? How can we get over there?
We're not to go on the boat when it's stormy like I did last time.
Oh, God, I did that too, it was
That
awful.
was horrible.
It's like this huge 70-mile-an-hour winds or blast.
And as your friend
We had
said,
a cabin.
more in the pie, fuel sales, cities, destinations.
We got, I think, 2 totally different markets that are gonna jump on these planes
Mm-hmm.
from Milwaukee or Green Bay to come over here. They're comparing it to the ferry. They're not looking at, well, I can get to Manistee from Chicago, and I can get to Chicago from anywhere. you know, you can't, the amount of people that were probably bouncing from Green Bay to Milwaukee down to Chicago to fly up to Manistee, I think is gonna be limited. And the way it kind of sounds like it's set up, it's gonna be like a milk run where only two people might get off here, one person gets on, and then they go on to the next stop. So I just think it's different. I hear what you're saying, and let's not blow our marketing budget on this kind of tiny part, but I think the idea of diversifying is gonna be good.
And this
If I
is a
could,
test
that's
run.
exactly what Chippewa has seen. So Chippewa County, up in Sault Ste. Marie, proposed on this program last year, was successful, ran a 3-month trial with it last summer, and they are now added this as a service line for the upcoming summer, that's not being part of a grant. So they proved it to one of the carriers that that was a reality and they could move forward with it. So, you know, it has some potential to lead to something better, as Barry was indicating, you know, of more diversification potentially, because you've got a situation that proves itself. So could be something that, you know, grows into something a bit larger.
Or it all fall apart.
Oh, sure.
As long as
That's right.
it doesn't,
But we already
you know, to
approved
your original
go
point,
forward, so.
if we were seeing that this was gonna cost us $30,000 of extra expenses, I would say no, can't risk that. We're talking, yes, will some dollars get allocated, but it doesn't affect our bottom line. It's just about priorities, and to the extent we can minimize that, I think are all the details that should be looked at.
So if we've surrounded the issue, we probably need a motion.
No, there's no motion.
You already
It's
made
It's already submitted, right?
Submitted, we're waiting for the grant.
I'm just updating the board
Update,
under old
okay.
business, what got submitted based on last month's discussion.
The next at-bat. MDOT sponsor contract.
So that takes me to here. So this is, so our sponsor contract is essentially our contract with MDOT that is channeling FAA funding to our projects. So as I've been, you know, reporting to the board, we have a project, a 2024 project that did design, went out for bids, low bid came in, was essentially accepted at the recommendation. We've been waiting on the funding for that to come through. This project covers runway lighting, it covers improvements to our runway safety area, which is actually the largest part of it, because we actually have to put in retaining walls and all sorts of things in the southwest corner of our airport. And it includes a new beacon. Our beacon has been out of service now for basically a year and a half. That funding, that project is well north of $1 million, and therefore clearly outside of our traditional $150,000 a year, even if we pooled up 4 years of that. So we had to dip our toes in the pool of funding called discretionary funds from the FAA. We were lucky to be one of probably only 2 airports in the state of Michigan for this past year to have secured funds through that. These are those funds now flowing through to us via this agreement. Now, this and the next item are tied together. So this does not fund the entire project. So I mentioned there were 3 components, one being the beacon. The beacon is intended to be funded with bill funds by partisan infrastructure law, which as of January 21st, all grant funding under that program, as well as one of the other big ones, is on hold for at least 90 days. We've got a bidder and a contract that was issued back in September for this project, with an anticipated start date of May of this year. And we have, at this point, 90% of the funding secured, and the other 10% may be delayed 90 days, may be delayed more, may never come in. So we're caught up in all the stuff that's happening at the Washington level. This is how it's flowing through to us. So that's what these next two items under new business are about. So my recommendation is that we accept the money that we can get. And I had requested from Mead and Hunt a recommendation on what we should do about the contract with the firm that's to do the project, and heard back from her after I'd sent the rest of this out on Friday. And Mead and Hunt's recommendation is that we should approve the contract with contingency that it not be signed until the remaining funding come in place. And I would add also upon full legal review on that, so that we don't have to call a special meeting
Right.
once these pieces come together. But if they do come together, it can just happen. If they don't come together, there's gonna have to be some renegotiation with the contractor on what can be done, when it can be done. Will they hold or not hold their prices, considering it will now potentially be a year after they bid, or some of this might actually come together. So, does that all make sense?
Yes, it does. Totally.
So,
So,
then we are at, on this one, is, is there a motion to approve accepting the sponsor contract with MDOT? And amount of that,
Our match is,
this is it's right here. So federal share, roughly 1.6 million. State share, 40,000, local share, 40,000. That's the 2.5%. So the 5% match, 2.5% state, 2.5% local.
I'll make that motion.
And if I could have that motion include that I'm authorized to execute, because MDOT has a
Yes.
whole electronic digital signature thing that I'm the only one that can sign some of these
does it
things.
need to be your name, or does it need to be the manager? Just curious.
I'd say you can do by title, so airport director.
You had said something about review and, legal review. Do we want that in the motion as well?
For this one, no, because George has multiple times, because this is, every time we get funding through this, it comes in one of these, and George has always said, this is state boilerplate, there is no chance to really change it, and there's therefore not much risk. The vendor contract for the construction, that's a little bit more, less
Okay.
boilerplate.
So the motion is made.
your second?
I'll second that motion.
Is there an amount on that?
The total, is $1,695,922.
Adam Dodd?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Jeff Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Goodman?
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky? Yes. Mr. Peabody?
Yes.
Okay, next.
So then the second half is the contract with the contractor for this project. Hold on, where that is.
There's two.
So this would be the contract, between the Airport Authority and M&M Excavating Company. Until I got Stephanie's recommendation on Friday, I would not have recommended that we approve this, but I like her approach to theoretically save us a special meeting. To approve it, allow the, board chair to sign contingent upon receiving remaining funding and legal review. And then the amount on this is $1,717,408.75.
We have D&O insurance director's officers.
We do not.
Have we ever?
No.
And so, if we don't get the match, we wouldn't move forward. That's what I heard you
We've got to
say.
figure out some, either pulling the beacon from the project, seeing if they'll hold their costs for everything else, or I don't know, because we can authorize this funding through this discretionary funding for amounts. Now we've got to figure out how to keep the project within that, even though the ground rules keep changing.
In that path to keep the project within that amount, that path isn't clearly articulated in the contract.
No, because this was created, they signed it back in September 23rd, so it's been sitting on my desk while we've been waiting for the funding to come through. We're not gonna sign a $1.7 million contract with no funding. Now we've got 90% of it. It's better than nothing, but not quite good enough to do the project, because we're not writing the check to close the difference.
So I've been here.
I think I ordered us lunch. Long day.
So,
Stephanie, if you're still on, do you have anything else to add? Any reading of the tea leaves as to what's going to happen, maybe? I see you took
Can you hear
yourself off.
yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
There, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Fortunately, depending on how you look at it, you're in good company. I mean, every other airport that's waiting on this funding has the same problem. So we're hopeful that the contractors are gonna hold their prices while this works itself out. Each day that passes here, we potentially have to push to the fall anyway, because we did not want to do this work and have to shut the runway down during your summer season. So at some
Actually,
point,
that's
we
a good-
will have to make a
that's a good
decision.
That's a good point, Stephanie, and I'm sure it's been mentioned, but probably not for a year on this, since we're doing the runway lighting on our main runway, we are scheduled to have to close the airport for, I think, 10 to 14 days to do this. So we will not have contour service for 2 weeks when this is done, which is why it was scheduled for May, before we start hitting summer traffic levels. If we miss that window, we're going to want to push it to September, kind of our little lull there. But it still has to occur during our construction season, so it can't happen in January next year. Thank you for reminding me of that, Stephanie.
So what do you need from the board?
You know, you could either approve this with the contingencies mentioned, you could leave it sit until more is known. And if we have to respond quickly to something, we have to call a special meeting to get it approved then. Those are really your two options, I think, at this point.
Wouldn't we want to know?
We're just waiting on the money, right? Then we're good to go. Then we'll figure out when the timing is right. That's what I understand, right? So I would move we approve the contract
With the contingencies.
with the contingency.
That being both the final funding sources and legal review.
Yes.
Correct.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you.
All support that. Taking time to vote.
What'd you guys obligate me to?
So Adam,
Just vote yes.
Oh, and then add that, well, Dylan, I won't speak for yourself, who do you want to be authorized to sign next case?
well, I would say that would be you as the
Airport
director. Yeah.
Often we do our board chair, but if you need anything.
If you wanna see how it feels, Dylan, maybe the vice chair.
I don't wanna sign personally. I'd rather share the liability with you guys, but, I don't see any other way forward. I mean, we're all just waiting on funding, so when the funding comes in, we'll just,
No sense re-messing with it.
yeah. And Stephanie, and question for Barry, I mean, are the feds aware of the disruption that this is that this is taking on the local level?
Keenly aware.
Is anybody talking about it?
Sure.
Or do
Of
we,
course,
we need some other,
they're aware.
okay.
They created it. Okay, so are we at a point, to call the roll? Okay. And, in the motion, legal review, and, matching funds, local, part of the motion.
Well, specifically, the remaining funding be made available and legal review.
Thank you.
Adam Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Jeff Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Beckman,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky,
Yes.
Mr. Picard.
Yes.
I don't know what your intentions were for that stuff. Do you want to finish this meeting and then do that?
All depends how long the director's report
I
is.
think it can be fast, at least compared to everything else that's happened today.
5 minutes fast?
Promise less than 10.
Okay.
Okay.
Here we go.
No incidents, accidents. Hangars, we've talked about, a couple times. GSA lease, I've heard back from them, I said this week, so early last week. They now need additional docs that show the relationship between the airport authority and the county. They're asking for things they already have, which is the title, deed and title for the property itself. So we'll see how that moves forward. Our primary plow truck received some damage after backing into a snowbank. It broke our the ice spreader. West Coast Farm Supply was able to repair that in 2 days, so unfortunately, we didn't have any significant snowfall during that point in time, so that was repeated, but kind of points out that we kind of have a single point of failure for certain features. We have a backup plow truck, but not a backup sand de-ice unit. We've been talking about our boiler issues here. In our maintenance barn, we've had custom sheet metal out, I think now 4 times, trying to troubleshoot and track down an issue out there. I consider that the new one, but that building's already 13 years old, so everything starts getting older. That's why George and I are going to be working on an interesting capital layout plan. Employments, I do not have numbers for January from Contour. However, if I were to guess, based on what I know, it's going to be about 680 versus 456 a year ago. So a roughly 45% uptick. So good growth. In February, similar numbers, around that 700-ish, which will be less growth than last year. I'm anticipating probably around 25% growth versus Cape Air last year in February. As far as reliability on time, they canceled 13% of their flights in January, which is compared to 17% for Cape Air a year ago, 19% 2 years ago. So Contour actually did better from a cancellation standpoint than Cape Air was doing. The perception isn't necessarily that way in the community, and as a result, I had one meeting with internal Contour folks on weather and cancellation and communication. Adam called a meeting with Ben Munson, Matt Chaffetz actually joined that meeting where we talked about these things. Everyone's aware and working hard. I don't know if you have any specific update you want to give on that call.
Well, the outcome was Cape Air's, or Contour is gonna provide us bi-weekly reports on cancellations, days, and, they were very agreeable to, you know, doing some KPIs and tracking performance. And we thought that if we had, at the request of at least me, if not formal group, you know, if we were checking in every couple of weeks to see if on-time departures were increasing and delays were going down, and if there were delays, why, you know, that would create a sense of urgency. And we expressed that, you know, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression, and there's just a tremendous amount of people using this service. I mean, I think Barry is, am I correct to say that if they don't sell another ticket for March, it'll be our busiest month on record?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, they're actually about 20% behind right now, Cape Air's pre-bookings for March last year.
December was the second busiest month. I thought there was a strong number.
December was the second busiest December.
Okay. But at any rate, I think the point remains that, we want to make sure there's not a public perception issue, that they dig themselves in a hole that they can't get out of. And so.
You do have one person that's ranting on Facebook, but and no matter what I've told her, she just isn't gonna stop. But, I do see more people chiming in and saying, not my experience, doing really well. So I think that the public is starting to shut her down. Because people have more positive comments.
You know, I've quoted Barry's comment, the best of times, the worst of times, in some of my, touches, if you will.
The other thing I'll add is essentially out of those communications, Ben Munson, Cape Air's president, will be joining us in person at our meeting next month. We'll have an in-person
Airfares,
The other thing I would note is in the packet, Cape Air, and I put in your packet, they shared their performance and
Yeah,
growth.
Contour, but yes.
And I really,
So not much has changed on the airfare front, and in the sense of time, I'm not gonna really focus on that, you had it in there. We've already really hit a lot of this to death on our current projects and what the issues are. The T hangar doors, we talked about earlier, wanting more based aircraft. One of the big issues is the quality of those doors. That is bill funded, and it's hung up with, those same funding issues. Remarking crack sealing, half of it was done last fall. I got confirmation that we should be one of the first airports when they start that project up this year. I'm hoping spring, but I don't have a date. Contour, January had good and bad periods. Official numbers I already mentioned aren't available. And when I put this together last week, I was anticipating a 34% increase in February. I'm now predicting probably closer to 25, based on now that we're a third of the month through. Nothing here that's really, we just talked about the meetings. Ben Munson joining us. Contour did update us that their United Interline is now fully implemented, so it now works through United.com and their web app, so Manistee, through those channels as well. And I already mentioned that Cadillac Aircraft Service is now contracted for maintenance with them, and that's my report. I don't know if I got it in 10 minutes or not, but you took a minute and a half of it.
there you go. Great, thank you, Barry. Has anyone joined for public comment?
Nope.
Okay. Comments by authority members, maybe we could do that over pizza. How about adjournment? Okay, great. Okay. Let's see.
Thank you for joining us, Stephanie.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Separate things that will.
Thanks, enjoy your afternoon.
One will have carryover, obviously, no payout.